Hello, everyone. Welcome to our latest in our series of Friendship Places webinars, in which we talk about the various activities and programs we undertake, the landscape of the city and the region, and how that impacts those we serve, the people we serve, and really get an opportunity to talk to some of our team that do the in the field work. It's so important and critical to making so many people's lives better. So I am Chris Rutledge, VP External Affairs. I am only going to speak for this little bit here. I'm actually going to turn this over to Jean-Michel now, who then will turn it over to Sean, who will then turn it over to Faith and Scarlet. This should be a really great conversation. As I mentioned to folks who had joined us earlier, these are always more robust and engaging when we hear questions from you. So upon the conclusion of our three panelists speaking, please think about questions that are of interest to you, and because if they're of interest to you, I'm sure they're of interest to other folks. And this is how we keep these things vibrant and active. So Jean-Michel, without further ado, I'm going to stop speaking and turn this to you.
Yes, well, thank you, Chris, for organizing the webinar as usual, and thank you all for being online with us this afternoon. I also want to thank our speakers, of course, Faith, Scarlett, and Sean. Youth services has become a very important part of our mission, and Sean is going to give you an overview of the services we provide and some services to come, actually. So I'm not going to go on too long. I'm just going to throw it to Sean. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sean Reed, and I serve as the Vice President for Regional Programs here at Friendship Place. And I'm excited to talk about this topic, about the work that we have undertaken over the last almost 10 years to help youth and young adults stabilize their lives through housing, employment, education, and so many other service areas. What I want to do to start is just to share a little bit about how the services to youth and young adults have really transformed over the last decade here in the District of Columbia, and how we've also been able to really take the model of a positive youth development approach and work to expand that to meet the needs of youth and young adults outside of the district as well through our Before 30 program. So back in 2013, 2014, the District of Columbia had really identified that there was an increasing population of youth and young adults who were experiencing homelessness, who identified as runaway or were unstably housed. And at that time, the city council had looked at this and said, we need to do something about this. And so they established at the time what was known as the End Youth Homelessness Act of 2014. And this put into motion a lot of services, a lot of practices to help ensure that the district was working to meet the needs of youth and young adults who were experiencing homelessness, runaway, or unstably housed. One of the key features to the End Youth Homelessness Act was the establishment of an annual census or youth count that started in 2015. And this endeavor is done every single year during the month of September, and I think we're about 4 or 5 days now into the 2023 youth count. And what happens during that time is that organizations like Friendship Place and other youth serving organizations, the district government, the Office of the State Superintendent, DC Public Schools, DC Public Libraries, a lot of different groups are focused over a 2-week period to engage and identify individuals who are between the ages of 18 to 24, which is what we call transition age youth, to identify what their housing situation is, that they are experiencing homelessness by residing in a shelter or transitional housing program, if they are experiencing unsheltered homelessness, which would be that they're staying outdoors in places that are not meant for human habitation, or if they are unstably housed, which means that they may be moving from place to place, couch surfing, having a short stay with one household and then having to leave there and to go to another. And so they're constantly moving around and really don't have a stable housing situation. And so that census then will give us information on what we need to do as a community to address the needs of youth and young adults, which could be anything related to increasing street outreach services, which is a service that we do offer in collaboration with the DC Department of Human Services through our Youth Connect program, which Faith will talk more about that. Looking at projects like rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, and then also targeting those services to specific needs within the youth population. There's an increasing number of young people who identify as part of the LGBTQ plus community. More than a third of individuals who are experiencing homelessness during the youth count identify as LGBTQ. 5% identify as transgender. And so there is a growing services across the city to ensure that there are programs and services there to meet the needs of individuals who identify as LGBTQ. Just to kind of look at what happened in 2022, which is the most recent data we received from the youth count. During that youth count, they counted 588 young people who were experiencing homelessness in the District of Columbia. That is an increase of more than 15% from the prior year. And those are all single households. So these are all individual youth, not affiliated with a family unit or a family of origin who self-identified as experiencing homelessness within the district. Within that group, there was an additional 360 who were unstably housed. So in total, there were more than 940 young people who identified as either experiencing homelessness or who were unstably housed in the district. And that is a drastic increase. And that's something that has been seen not only in DC, but in other communities across the United States, that there has been increases in youth experiencing homelessness, single adults experiencing homelessness, while there have been significant decreases in family households and veteran populations of homelessness. And so there's a lot of focus now that's coming in that we need to shift that attention or expand that focus to all of the different groups that are experiencing homelessness. Another key thing that is vitally important, and this is something that our teams really look to address as they meet people where they're at, to understand their unique stories and situations so that we can match services specific to their needs, is that we have seen that there are a growing number of individuals who are youth that are fleeing domestic violence situations. This is a rising percentage that we are seeing in the population. And during last year's youth count, nearly 50% of individuals who were literally experiencing homelessness at that time of the survey were stated that they were actively fleeing a domestic violence situation. For those who were unstably housed and moving from place to place, 80% of them had identified that they were fleeing a domestic violence situation. And so this is a huge indicator of what is prompting a lot of housing instability and homelessness for our youth population. Again, that is from the ages of 18 to 24. We do see some unaccompanied minors, so those who are under the age of 18. And that is a very small percentage of youth that we do see in the city who are experiencing homelessness. But for us at Friendship Place, we have continually looked to see where are the needs in our city. How are we to partner with our key stakeholders like the DC Department of Human Services and so many other community-based organizations. And we started our youth, our vision for youth services back in the early part of the 2010s when we were identifying what are the presenting needs in the community. And we were actually approached by a small group from the community that said they also were looking at this as a presenting need in the community and wanted to support efforts by Friendship Place to address this need. And so back in 2013 is when we launched our Before 30 program and was really focused on the needs of youth and young adults between the ages of 17 to 29 and using a youth development focus. And so we always talk in our youth programming that just because you turn 18 doesn't mean that you are an adult developmentally. Legally, as an adult, yes, but developmentally, there could have been instances or events that interrupted a developmental track that, for example, there could have been instances of abuse or trauma or instability earlier on in childhood or adolescence. And that can disrupt developmental process and skill building for individuals. And so we talk about chronological age, and that's what a lot of programs are based upon, that when you hit certain age levels, you either are eligible or you don't, or you are no longer eligible for those services. For us, we look at, yes, there's that chronological age, but what is also that developmental age? And so we understood in those very early days through the support in the Before 30 program that an individual who is chronologically 22, 23 may actually be 15 developmentally because of traumatic experiences and events that took place during key developmental milestones. And so for us in all of our youth programming, we want to always meet people where they're at so that we are person-centered in our approach, matching the services to what it is that they need, not a prescribed way, but in a way that is collaborative. And then we want to work with those individuals to find services and supports that will meet them at that developmental stage so that we can continue to work and support that growth period for them. So we started that with our Before 30 program back in 2013. And then the city, as a result of this End Youth Homelessness Act, began to infuse money into Department of Human Services, and we saw a significant growth of service across the district with transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, and street outreach services. And street outreach service was the contract and the services that we partnered with DHS on in the fall of 2015. And since then, we have been providing key outreach services across all 8 wards of the district to individuals between the ages of 18 and 24. And through that, engaging to connect them to pathways to stability. And I'll let Faith talk about that here in a moment. The other exciting part of this is that as we continue to look at the needs of our community and the different ways that Friendship Place can play a role in supporting youth, is that we are excited that in the very near future that we will be stepping into providing youth rapid rehousing programs for young people in the district. And so we'll have the ability to serve up to 30 individuals at any given time in their own housing across the district with that very youth-focused developmental approach, as well as supporting with workforce development. That is a huge part of these program services. And so we will find a wonderful collaboration between the Welcome Center and Aim Higher. And we'll be excited to share more with the community about those efforts and the impacts in probably the early part of 2024 once we begin those program services. But I will stop here because I want to turn to the featured stars, those who are doing the active work with our youth. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Faith Allen, one of our youth street outreach specialists, and Scarlet Levy, our youth and young adult specialist with our Before 30 program. And so I'll hand it over to Faith.
Hello, everyone. Like Sean said, my name is Faith Allen, and I serve as the youth street outreach specialist at Friendship Place. I'm here today to talk about the distinctiveness of youth homelessness, particularly from the perspective of what I do, and that is youth outreach. Next slide, please. The next one after this as well. So our mission statement for Youth Street Outreach is that the Youth Street Outreach program works to engage transition age young people through trusting relationships and by connecting them to supportive communities and stable housing. Next slide. So like Sean said, and explained that the youth that we serve are on their own. They are considered head of their household, meaning that they are looking for their own means of stability. Youth homelessness looks like couch surfing, staying outside, staying in abandoned buildings, just not under your supervision. And I'll get under parents' supervision, and I'll get into how that, or family supervision, I'll get into how that translates into their lives later on. But for the youth development, the youth that we engage age range from 17 to 24. Our program utilizes a youth development approach that is rooted in principles of empowerment and relationships. Although there are several youth development approaches and practices, the Youth Street Outreach Program focuses on 4 major principles in the services provided. One being youth development is based on emphasis of strength-based approach, not their deficiencies or failures. 2, youth development occurs through quality relationships based on trust, and that's a big one, building rapport with our community and our participants so that they trust us and trust what we're saying, that we're here to help them. 3, youth development occurs when young people are connected to others, such as their family, community, school, work, and peers. And then 4, youth development happens when young people are engaged and empowered. Sometimes that looks like youth leading and directing the services that we offer instead of just trying to force those services on them. And that next slide, please. So this one's a little funny. You can just click all the way through. It has a list, and I'll just talk through it. So the Youth Street Outreach Program is designed to deliver services based on staff proficiency and implementing best practices related to youth safety, cultural competence, and language accessibility. These services are meant to provide a cultural sensitive manner, taking into account the unique needs and vulnerabilities of homeless and unstable housed youth. So how does that resource within the YSO program support goals of participants? So we offer, as listed, outreach engagement services. This involves actively reaching out to youth who may be homeless or at risk of homelessness and engaging them into the services that we provide. We also do coordinated entry assessments, like TASE SPDATs, VI SPDATs, and full SPDATs, to determine the level of need and help prioritize the assistance that we offer to the youth. We also help with vital documents, government IDs, birth certificates, social security cards. We help distribute hygiene items and safe sex kits. We help with transportation assistance, shelter and housing identification, benefit assistance. And that looks like going to help with food stamps, because we try to provide the tools. A lot of the youth, since they're 18, they don't really have sometimes the organization to get IDs, to go get a birth certificate, to get a job, to get food stamps. So we help them gain the tools to prioritize and eventually so they can be self-sufficient. We also assist with coordinating resources such as for mental health, healthcare resources, legal aids, and sometimes we help with basic needs like clothing and food, employment services, and immigration services. These services are delivered with sensitivity to their unique backgrounds and circumstances, ultimately helping them work towards their goals and improve their overall well-being. Next slide, please. So this is just I'm going to give an example of how Friendship Place has really helped. Well, YSO, Youth Street Outreach, has really helped the participants. Since I've been here for 2 years, and I've had several different participants, but I wanted to give an example about one of my first participants when I first started working here. She was a young lady from Trinidad. Her life, in her eyes, had been marked by adversity. She had a criminal record, and she was couch surfing, and she had lost all hope on just building a future. But she Googled youth homeless help, and she came across our drop-in center, and she came in and asked for the next steps. So I conducted a housing assessment for her, and we realized that we had something in common, which was dreams deferred and dreams put on hold. So I leaned on my training in trauma-informed care and my own life experience, and that's began to earn her trust and build a genuine connection. And from there, we embarked on her future, and we polished her resume. Through that, she secured a job, and then she ended up drafting a business plan that I approved, and I connected her to a program that's in Ward 8, because we do service all 8 wards. And it's called Incubate 8, and they focus on helping Black women in business. And through that program, she was able to go through a 12-week course and have her own storefront, and she gained stability. She gained confidence, financial literacy, and now she's giving back to her community through her business, and she's able to support her family. And that all happened with just us sitting down, gaining trust, building her resume. She got connected to her mental health aides, and was able to give back to her community back home and her newfound community in DC. Next slide. So some trends that we have found through our outreach efforts, we encounter a large range of youth experiences, and no 2 youth stories are the same. However, it is important to note that many transition age youth individuals engage with the YSO program have experienced significant trauma in their lives. And these traumas may have occurred during their childhood, within foster care situations, due to lost family relationships with religious communities, maybe finding their gender identity or sexual orientation. But it all boils down to, as a result, that these experiences have somehow caused to their housing instability and homelessness. We work with a diverse array of cases, and what makes our program incredibly unique, in my opinion, is that it communicates to these youth that it's never too late and this is not their last chance. Many of the youth have felt like turning 18 was their last chance, but through the program, they're presented with another opportunity to complete high school, embark on their college journey, start their own businesses, address their mental health, or turn their dreams deferred into dreams fulfilled. And then the next slide, please, which is my last slide, and what brought me to this work. So I was born in New Orleans, and I grew up in Houston. And Texas, when I was growing up, was ranked the 4th in terms of largest homeless population in the United States. It has now dropped to 5th, with Washington now being the 4th. But during my elementary, middle, and high school years, I had to complete a set number of community service hours to advance to the next grade. And I consistently always chose homeless population because back then I believed all they needed was a helpful hand. As I've grown older, I have come to realize that the needs of the homeless go beyond a simple assistance. They require someone to lend a listening ear, connect them to resources, advocate for their rights, provide encouragement, and believe in their potential. Fortunately, I've had the privilege of encountering people who have offered all these forms of support throughout my lifetime, and these experiences have played a significant role in who I am today. But in all honesty, I can go on and on about why I do this, but it all boils down to it's just where my passion lies. I consider myself very fortunate to have discovered this passion at a very early age and been able to hone my commitment. But additionally, I see there's a pressing need to address issues faced in our society. And I just believe that I have the skills, but more so the determination to make a meaningful difference. And now I will pass it on to Scarlet so she can tell you more about our Before 30 program.
Everyone, thanks so much, Faith, for that presentation. I'm really happy to be here. If you notice me looking over, I will say there is a mouse in my office right now. So please be warned. They're harmless and precious, but they are distracting. So, okay. So basically, what is the Before 30 program? Well, first, let me go into my role. So I am the Youth and Young Adult Specialist here at Friendship Place. I fall under the Welcome Center division of Friendship Place, which is our Zero Barrier Service Center. So Before 30 assists youth and young adults between the ages of 17 to 29 So my program goes a little bit over the Youth Street outreach, and we work on goals related to self-sufficiency, like housing, education, mental health, employment support, through intensive or supportive case management. We also utilize the same sort of approach as Youth Street Outreach. So it's a youth development approach, which, just to recap there, is strengths-based, focused on building quality relationships and overall empowering participants and empowering them as well to connect with their communities. Next slide, please. So this is our mission statement, to provide a safe place for youth and young adult households under the age of 30 to engage with developmentally driven support services focused on stability and life-giving connections to the community. So based on the mission statement, you can sort of see two camps forming, right? You can see the traditional sort of caseload where you work directly with participants, and then also the community-oriented piece, which is extremely important. So if you go to the next slide, we can see the two camps. There we go. Okay, so the first camp is participant caseload, which is supportive case management services. This will include identifying, establishing, and kind of working towards participant goals that contribute to just generally increasing their quality of life. We use the same youth development approach though. So everything is completely based on their time frame and the sort of skills that they want to accomplish and the goals that they have. So we're never imposing our own skills or our own goals on them. Some trends that I've noticed is the majority of my participants identify as LGBT, and the average age is around 25. So I do have some participants that are older, like 28 or 29, but the majority of them have gone through the homeless system in DC as a youth and may be re-experiencing homelessness at a different part in their life due to circumstances and changes in their experiences. So the next camp is the community partnerships. So that includes service provider outreach and workshops and collaborations. Basically, we're just building relationships with other service providers to learn about their community resources and how we can best support participant-specific needs through the Before 30 resources. So next slide, please. Click again. Yeah, so they're going to go through a little list of things that we offer, very similar to YSO in terms of our needs. So when Faith listed out all those things, it's very similar in that way. So basic needs, food, hygiene, referrals to mental health or education support, case management. There might be another one or two, vital document assistance. Yeah. Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to give you a little, there we go, a little day in my life. We always joke at Friendship Place that there's no way to say what you do day to day because it changes so drastically. So for example, I would meet a participant at a grocery store to go grocery shopping. Then I would come to the office, have a phone call to set up details for a workshop. And then maybe someone would come in or send me their resume that we'd work on together. And then, for instance, I would go down to the drop-in service center to distribute hygiene supplies, mail, and help someone apply for SNAP benefits. Next slide, please. Okay, so similar to Faith, I'm going to give you a little story. So the purpose of this is just sort of set a real-world example of our services in action and how we help specific participants with the resources that we're able to provide. So I had a participant who had housing instability since 2015. So the specific situation here, without going too much into detail, was his family was aware of his sexual orientation. He identified as LGBT, but there was other circumstances at play and they got into a big explosive fight. And then he found himself homeless overnight. So he was couch surfing for several years until he finally decided to sleep in his car. So he's been staying in his car for about a year and a half and working full time as well. So when I met him, the biggest thing was how we can support him to maintain his transportation, because his car is the place he sleeps. It's also where all of his stuff is. It's also how he gets to and from work. So that was really important. So we were able to assist with gas money as well as minor repairs. Of course, we also offered food, clothing, additional winter warmth items, like a coat when it got cold. And then the thing with his mental health, he was in a really difficult spot because of the situation was so explosive and so sudden for him. So a big thing we focused on was mentoring. And so when he was ready, we started talking about how to prioritize his own mental health and then eventually reconnecting with his family and how that relationship would look like for him. So now he was actually matched with a housing program about a month ago, and he's going to be moving in next month. So we're going to be purchasing furniture for him and also assist with move-in assistance. But like I said before, these types of situations, it's very important to recognize that the time frame is very much of participants' own creation. So if he didn't have a goal that he wanted to reconnect with his family, that wouldn't be something that I would recommend until he brought it up. Okay. So next slide, please. All right, so that was the first camp, participant focused. The other part of Before 30 is community outreach. So this includes network building, workshops, and social service collaborations that are specifically focused for youth populations. Next slide, please. I'm gonna look at some pictures. Okay. Some of the pictures are better than others, I will say. In the bottom left-hand corner, we have some visitors from Passion City Church who did some community service here and spoke about resources that we were able to share. We also had visitors from Texas Southern University in the middle, and the purposes of that were the same. And the top picture of the rainbow table, that was at the youth wellness mixer. So we offered resources for youth and sort of told them a little bit about the Before 30 program as well. It was a whole spread of different resources. So there was like a safe sex table, there was a drug treatment table, there was a mental health table, a general health table. So they gave out like little muffins, which was awesome. And then on the right, our most recent event was a fitness related event, which was boxing. So there you can see me trying to box, keyword being trying. And in the future, we hope to host more health and fitness related events. So self-defense and a dance workshop will be coming up within the next couple months. And the purposes of all the health and fitness related activities were really just, it was in presenting need for participants. I asked, what classes, what types of workshops would you be more interested in? And they said, well, this is something I always wanted to do, but I never had the opportunity to, which would fall into the sort of health type classes. I mean, who doesn't want to take boxing just one time, right? And then the other big focus is job readiness and employment preparation. So we will be working with the next couple months with one of our other divisions, Aim Higher, to work on a job readiness program for our youth. Next slide, please. Okay, so under community outreach, there's a specific initiative for Before 30, which is our LGBT service development. So this would include our LGBT work group, LGBT specific case management, and LGBT focused events. The purpose of this was really, like Sean was saying, to fill the gaps for the LGBT community because there is such a large number that are experiencing homelessness right now and have been for quite some time. So if you go to the next slide, please, we'll see some more pictures. Oh, no, we won't. Mission statement, then pictures. Okay, so this is the mission statement of our work group. So I became co-chair of the LGBT work group in April, and you guys can read this one yourself. The purpose of the work group for me and for the other co-chair, Chris Kennedy, is to update, reinvigorate, and support LGBT participants through LGBT-specific policies and activities, and also to set an example to other service providers on how we can best support our participants. And we really do see ourselves as leading in terms of inclusivity and LGBT community at Friendship Place. Now pictures, please. Yes, okay. So on the left and bottom is our Friendship Place Pride event. We had that during Pride Month. And then on the other top corner is the LGBT Chamber of Commerce event, which was sort of a networking opportunity to learn of other service providers and what LGBT resources they had available as well. So there's everybody. Those are nicer pictures, I think. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, so I just kind of want to close out with what brought me into this work. So my dad had a period of homelessness for a while, and I was working in women's nonprofits. And when I was working in women's nonprofits, it wasn't very hands-on. There's only so much you can do based on the specific position. And so I wanted to find something where I would be actively working with people on a daily basis, where I'd be able to improve their lives and their experiences and build connections with people as well. The LGBT initiative was something that's very passionate to me personally. I definitely had the privilege of having a supportive family when I came out as LGBT over a decade ago, by the way. Next month is my 11-year coming out anniversary, so I'm really excited about that. And so, yeah, I just also wanted to offer support to other LGBT young people. That was one of the things that I definitely lacked, was kind of a LGBT figurehead, a mentor, someone to look up to, that I really could have used at that age. So hopefully I can offer that to some people as well. But that's the end of my presentation. So thank you guys so much. And I'll pass it over to Chris. Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much. I mean, really, very interesting and very heartfelt stories that you're telling, and really just it's fascinating what brought you all to this work and how much care and compassion that you bring to what you do every day. As I mentioned at the outset, this is always more interesting and robust when people have questions that they share in the chat. So let me start at the top here and see where we can go here. Margie had noted, and I don't know if there's a question, but maybe there's something you can take off on, even for typical teens, the brain doesn't fully develop until age 26 or so. And then she was knowing she had to go for another meeting, but bye, Margie. But, so Scarlet and Faith or Sean, I mean, any thoughts on that and how brain science and brain development impacts your work?
I mean, like, one of the big things, like, yes, I'm trying to remember when I was 18 and trying to feel like, when you're 18, you kind of have an imposter syndrome because you think of that title of adult at age 18, but taking into account what experiences have been there, and when we talk about this work and we frame this work, we talk about not what is wrong or what is broken or what is negative, but we talk about what has happened to an individual. And when you frame it in that way, you're taking into account and looking at things that are outside of their environment that are impacting them in a way that can cause interruptions, that can lead to trauma experiences, that can lead to all of these different pieces. So it's always about what happens versus what's wrong. And that's just a way to frame it, because so much of the experience that individuals have in the experience of homelessness is adapting to the environment. They are having to adapt for survival, for management, for so many different things. And so when we're able to look at it from that direction and looking how events or occurrences or even repeated experiences impact the brain, we know it's going to change how people react, how people communicate, how people respond to stimuli, whether it is another person or if it's any type of sensory experience. And so the brain is constantly adjusting, and it's even more important during those developmental time frames that it can actually be exponentially impactful as there's that continued brain development. What I love about our approach as an organization is that we look at that even beyond age 26. I've read even in some periodicals that have come out of the UK from studies is that they're even saying up to the age of 30 that there is still brain development happening. And so what we do, and we look at this and we see this extension of before 30 and youth outreach working together, is that we're recognizing that there is a very important decade of chronological time that can be very impactful. And I love how, I'm going to butcher it, but how Faith talked about, bringing those dreams that were kind of in the shadow, bringing it to them being fulfilled. It's such an important part of that work that we're doing. The other thing that really helps, I think, as an organization is that we have an in-house ability to transition individuals once they age out of our youth outreach program, which there is an age eligibility threshold that the day that an individual turns 25, there's a transition to other services. We can transition our services with that individual into before 30. So they don't have to go and find another organization. We don't have to go through an external referral process. And that really helps to build and cultivate that relationship of trust that has been built through those other services to continue on with individuals. I think that's one of the greatest benefits that we have in our youth programming, is that length of time that we can transition with people through our services. And I'll pause there and see if Faith or Scarlet have any other thoughts on that.
Seems like you've covered it. Thank you, Sean. Next question in the chat is, do we partner with Sasha Bruce in any way?
I can
Scarlet.
take this one. Yeah. So Before 30 has done specific outreach to Sasha Bruce. So we're in contact with somebody there. We've gone there like 3 or 4 times. And we plan to be going there every month now, the first week of the month, because their intakes or the participants that visit at Sasha Bruce are constantly changing. So that's one of the way that we can sort of help support youth before they age out. And that way it creates like a steady stream of support instead of having gaps in support where they could find themselves in more difficult situations. We also work with the Latin American Youth Center, which helps youth in DC up until the age of 24 as well.
Very good. Thank you. Let me see.
We also have been partnering with DC Central Kitchen as of, well, forever, but we go every Thursday now to do housing assessments and meet new youth.
Thank you.
Well, I'll also just chime in real quick. We're also a part of the Interagency Council on Homelessness Youth Committee. So we coordinate and are connected with all of the various youth providers in different ways. So we're part of the broader conversation on helping to influence policy programming at the city level. And so that's where a lot of our experience really comes into play in helping to advocate and lift the voices of youth in those environments.
Very good. Thank you. I see a comment from Lachelle asking about getting credentials to log into the system. Lachelle, I guess if you could reach out to, if you need assistance with that, Sean might be able to help. Sean will drop his email in the chat and he could provide assistance for that matter. Next question in the chat here. How would you describe the educational level and experience of the youth we work with? And do we find that they've experienced learning and or attentional challenges?
I can only speak for my participants. It depends so much based on who you're working with. Everyone's experiences are so unique. And so in terms of trends, honestly, I couldn't even begin to tell you a trend because like everyone has a different experience in terms of education for me. But Faith, if you want to speak on that, I'm sure your caseload is pretty different as well.
Yes, I was going to say that it's not really a trend for them to have any learning challenges. It's more so, I think, developmental, and no one has ever required them to think past a certain point. Like no one's pushed them to go to that next level. So they, once they given the tools, they usually excel. They just need the tools.
Thank you. Next question we have is, how do we keep track of participants in case they become homeless again?
For some of my participants, I do check-ins, but in terms of them becoming homeless again, they know where to reach out. So if something happens, they usually contact me before they become homeless again, but they'll go to another organization and we'll collaborate.
Very good. Thank you. Joe, you asked about funding needs and more broadly, how can those who are interested help? I can say that before 30 and street outreach programming and really all of our Welcome Center activities fall into that privately funded programming that we count on community support to make happen. We have a lot of programs that are funded by the government, whether it be the district or the Veterans Administration, whatever. But we also do a lot that's not. And so these are the programs that your private support go to and make a difference in every day. So without a doubt, we couldn't do this without all of you. Sean, I don't know if you want to add anything onto that.
Yeah, I always think about, as an organization, we've grown and we do a lot of contracting work, but the piece that really makes a huge impact is the ability, as our core value says, finding ways to say yes. And with a lot of contracting, there's funding, yes, but there are also a lot of structure and pieces that we're not able to use those funds in certain ways to sometimes meet the presenting need of an individual. And so a lot of that, the funding that is very, very impactful, that helps us, get us the rest of the way across the line for some individuals, are those private donations that allow us to be able to help meet those needs. I think Scarlet talked about a vehicle repair for an individual to address their primary transportation, storage, and sleeping accommodations. Being able to do that to preserve that state for them while we work on the housing side is so important, and is often a much less expensive intervention than some other interventions that would be like the alternatives that could be much more costly. So a lot of that private fundraising goes to really meet a lot of gap needs that kind of are those connecting dot to dot to get individuals to stability.
In terms of other in-kind support, obviously, we always make that request and ask for funding support. But Faith and Scarlet, are there in-kind needs that are helpful for you?
I can take this one. So we always have a need for hygiene supplies. So that would include unopened, unused soap, shampoo, conditioner, razors. Those are always in high need. In terms of clothing items, the only thing is we, of course, accept clothing items that are unused, new clothing items that we can distribute to participants at our Welcome Center. So we would give out t-shirts, underwear, and what else? And socks, but we do have some socks right now. But the underwear sizing and the t-shirts sometimes get a little finicky because we'll get mass donations from certain places that are like a 3 or 4XL, and they're really just not able to fit people to the way that they want. And that has been a little bit of a barrier. But yes, unworn new clothing items is always wonderful.
And with the winter coming up, jackets, sweaters, long sleeve shirts, thermals.
Very good.
Okay, thanks.
Before I moved on to the next question, I dropped 2 links in the chat. One is we are doing an ongoing anti-racism training series, and I just want to make a pitch. Our session 2 is next Wednesday. I dropped a link to that in the chat. And also on October 19th, we have our annual breakfast that you could sign up via the Eventbrite. I dropped a link to that in the chat. So I just wanted to make sure I didn't want to let the hour elapse without having made reference to that. But now let me take us back to our questions here. recent changes in the leadership of the Department of Housing. Has that impacted our work with, I'll say, looking specifically at young folk? Sean, I don't know if you might be best handling that.
Can you repeat that?
Due to recent changes in leadership and policies at the Department of Housing, how has that impacted both our work with young people and I guess more broadly?
So in terms of the district housing authority and the changes there, not as much with the youth programming. That has tended to, a lot of the youth housing programs are managed with direct funding to the provider, so it doesn't necessarily go through the housing authority to process housing subsidies and such like that. I think there may be some programs, but the majority are managed by the provider directly to do the housing support. I mean, any changes that happen in any office are going to create changes in practice, vision, policy, and so forth. And so I think with some of those changes, we'll see what that looks like in the near future. But the other piece too is we do a lot of advocacy on what the presenting needs are. So we do provide a lot of feedback in those systems and say, this process is actually creating longer periods of time for people to continue experiencing homelessness while they're waiting for their housing opportunity. So some policy changes could lengthen the time that it takes for someone to access their housing because there's additional procedures that get put into place. So there's a lot of that we work in and we navigate through. Jean-Michel has a lot of those conversations with key leaders in the city. My position has some of those conversations as well. Lynn Amano, our director for advocacy, has a lot of those interactions as well. And so, but a lot of it comes from our staff who are working directly with our participants to say, this is a challenge we're experiencing. How do we work with this? And then we also have those conversations with our partners in the system as well, our other youth system organizations like Sasha Bruce and Smile West. What are you experiencing so that we can join together in conversation too on the system level?
Thank you. Brenda, you'd asked in the chat for contact info for the Incubate program, and Faith, you had said you would reach out. So Brenda will get that information out to you because Faith is going to do some research on that. Evelyn, thank you for your kind words and for your generous support. It's nice to, as a retired clinical social worker, you appreciate the support, the approach that we take to our work. And so thank you. That's kind words. Question, how can we receive hygiene kits from Lachelle? And you're over at DC Central Kitchen, right, Lachelle? If I'm reading that correctly?
Yes, yes, I am.
Okay, so I guess the question is, DC Central Kitchen is looking to see if we have additional hygiene kits that can be shared with your team as you go out?
The opportunity, when Friendship Place come out to do the SPDAT on Opportunity Youth, if they could provide some hygiene kits for the Opportunity Youth that they do the assessment on.
Okay, I'll leave that to Faith and Sean and Scarlet to speak to that. Thank you for reaching out, Lachelle. Very good.
Thank you.
These have all been really wonderful and robust questions. We're actually coming up on the hour, so I think this might be a good opportunity to ask Sean and Scarlet and Faith if you've got any closing comments or observations, anything you want to put out into the community here while we have everyone online.
The only thing that I will say for my closeout is to say that how we work on addressing homelessness among the youth population is going to have an impact for the future generations experiencing homelessness. So if we interrupt and end homelessness for a youth and young adult, the likelihood of repeat episodes of homelessness, we can reduce that. We can dramatically impact that and reduce those experiences. And so it's vitally important that we continue to invest our resources and our experience and support towards ending homelessness among youth and young adults. And we are excited for the the growth that we will see in the coming months with youth rapid rehousing coming to the organization. And we just greatly value the support of this community here online and the broader Friendship Place community as we continue to serve youth and young adults throughout the district and the DC metro region.
Chris, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I was asking Scarlet and Faith if you had any closing comments.
Yeah, so my closing comment, we often get questions of, besides financial support, how can you help end homelessness just in your own experiences? And my answer is, for youth specifically, is to be a loving and supportive environment for the young people in your life, and encourage other people that you know to do the same. A lot of people, though the majority, almost everybody that I work with, it's because they were displaced by their own family members for various reasons, a million reasons under the sun. Educating yourselves, working with them, patience, all of that is wonderful, and that can really go a long way in their lives and the way that they grow up. So that's me. On to you, Faith.
Okay, well, I can't really top that, but I want to second what Scarlett said, and just thank you all for being here and listening, and supporting us and our youth.
Thank you. I'm going to make one quick, again, pitch for the breakfast and our anti-racism training series. And again, the links are in the chat there. We'd love to have you be part of all of those, both of those. Jean-Michel, closing comments from you.
Yes, well, I want to thank, of course, our speakers for this really interesting conversation. You really made the topic come to life. I think everybody learned a lot today. We appreciate your hard work out there in the field, and Sean, your leadership, of course, of the regional programs cluster. Thank you all for being online again with us this afternoon, and thank you for your support. As we always say, we could never do all this work without your help. So have a great rest of the day.
Take care. Thank you. I'm going to stop recording now.